Welcome back to Heads and Tails. Thank you so much for tuning in. This week, we have the pleasure of welcoming Lester, a highly accomplished, career-oriented individual who made the bold decision to retire early and move to Thailand. Lester now spends more time with his family and indulges in activities that truly matter to him. In this episode, Lester takes us on a journey of self-discovery, exploring the meaning of life beyond his executive role as a husband and father. He shares expert tips for those on a corporate career path, offering insights on how to strategically plan an early exit and embrace a more meaningful life. We also dive into Lester's carefully curated blog where he documents his experiences, and he also discussed his upcoming podcast aimed at helping others like him who want to retire early and find deeper purpose. I promise you won't want to miss this inspiring conversation. Rolling. Oh, beautiful. Latte. Nice. Do you always get lattes?
No. I prefer a flat white.
A flat white.
Yeah, less milk.
Less milk.
And I'm lactose intolerant, so
Oh no.
I drink oat milk or soy milk.
What does that feel like to be lactose intolerant? Or what happens when you drink milk? I have
Digestive issues.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Like gas and stuff.
Yeah.
Is it? So I know humans aren't supposed to be eating bread that much. The bread in the sense that America provides, right? Because if you eat in Italy, you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
But are humans also not supposed to drink milk in
Not
general?
sure. I imagine, yeah. I mean, the dairy industry is huge for a reason. So
That's something to think
yeah,
about.
and cheese.
And cheese too, yeah.
Cheese is everywhere. So
Why do they say when you eat a lot of cheese before going to bed, you might see nightmares? You've never heard
I
of
haven't
that?
heard that. No.
I think I've heard that in America. Lester, how are you today?
Good. Great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So
Feeling really good.
wonderful Wednesday.
The weather was a bit stormy yesterday, right?
Yeah, last night, yeah.
So I'm glad that it's really cleared up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually first curious about, since you're here for more than a year and a half, right?
Yeah.
About
2 years now.
About 2 years now.
Yeah,
So you've
July
seen
4th.
you've seen 2 cycles. How does it compare, like the rainy season and the off season, the on season?
It's raining most of the year. So unlike the States and Texas where I'm from, Texas follows like a general peak in rainfall around September. That's like hurricane season.
Right.
I grew up born and raised in Houston, and
Don't
we
mind
have to,
me. I'm just. You
we
don't
have
need
to
do
be
that.
very careful about that time.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't know this about Thailand, but Thailand follows a double hump. The peak actually happens in April.
Okay.
And it's pretty miserable, I think, when you have to, deal with a lot of the rainfall there
Yeah.
and the heat at the same time.
I honestly do not mind the heat or the rain. Well, I mind the heat a little bit, but the rainfall is no problem whatsoever because of the smoke. Since it's smoke clears out the smoke, I think rain is necessary.
Yeah. So the double whammy of like the heat plus the rainfall in April, and then it gets worse, I think. The rain is higher in September, August, and by the time December rolls around, it's like so much better.
Yeah.
It's my favorite part of the year here in Chiang Mai.
I think October,
nice, cool.
November, December, January, dare I say February, is still acceptable and great, like in Chiang Mai.
Yeah.
But we do get like 4 or 5 months. I think the rest of Yours just like a.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a fairly outdoors type of person, so
what do you
if
do?
I get camped up, like,
nice.
I get cabin fever inside the house, so it's good for me to.
Yeah. What do you
out.
do for outdoors? Trekking? Climbing?
Yeah, hiking,
Nice.
climbing,
Nice.
golf,
Beautiful.
swimming.
Nice.
There's really not that many indoor swimming options here in Chiang Mai. Everything's pretty much outdoors, so it kind of puts a damper into.
Nah. There's only Looper. That's kind of like okay for me. It's still outdoors.
Looper can get pretty crowded, but I like the length of the pool. It's nice. Yeah. Very
exactly. We do have quite a bit of amenities. Nice. Were you always outdoorsy, like back in Texas as well?
No, I think over time I was so focused back in the U.S. I was so focused on my job and my career that I rarely spent any time outdoors.
Oh no.
Like getting natural sunlight was a challenge.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
What was this job that made you not see the sunlight?
I was a corporate executive, and I was just in back-to-back meetings. It run the gamut from 7:30, 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And one little pet peeve that I have is like, whenever you schedule a meeting, it's always from 7 to 8 or 8 to 9. There's not any time in between meetings to get to the next room, so I'd rarely have any breaks. I'd always be backed up, meeting the meeting, running late to the next one, which would then force like a domino effect, and then if you end your day at 5, it'll end at 6 because you're backed up with meetings. Yeah, and it's not something that I miss.
Tell me about. So I had my little exposure to meetings and stuff, both in the academic world and in the corporate world. It was over Zoom, obviously, because I did most of my work remotely. But I sensed that we didn't really get a lot done on meetings. But give me your hot take on meetings in companies.
Every meeting should have a purpose. Typically, that purpose is to make a decision about something. Right. So I was very particular about how to schedule a meeting, being very efficient and effective about the time that's used. I always requested to have the purpose of the meeting prefaced, either in the invitation or in the document that serves as the discussion document that we would have. In those ways, I think meetings were, it got more and more impactful over time. They're kind of a necessary evil in corporate America, because the more senior you get, the more people are looking to you to make the right decisions about the organization. And so, as I grew more and more senior, I spent, unfortunately, too much time in meetings and then not enough time actually doing the thinking and the work that I enjoyed, being creative, making new relationships, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I think a lot of times, like, teachers would have to file in documents, or like people working in factories need to report things more than doing whatever they need to do. Like the paperwork and the filing and everything just takes way more time than the actual thing that you're there to do, which is to teach, which is to bend metal or whatever it needs to, whatever you're trying to do. But that might be just the way things are.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about big organizations and the decisions that they have to make around marketing, operations, human resources, that impact hundreds, thousands, sometimes, tens of thousands of people, meetings are important. Because you want to make sure that you're having the right discussions, looking at the decision and all the right factors. And I know of no better way than to get in a room, have all the facts in front of you, get everyone to contribute their input, and then have the decision maker weigh in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a necessary evil. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
And two books that I found very helpful on the topic. One is Principles by Ray Dalio.
Oh, yeah.
I think he goes into pretty good detail about the culture of meetings and how to make meetings more effective. And then Peter Drucker's Effective Executive. Yeah, I think he has a whole chapter dedicated to meetings.
Nice.
I found those two to be very helpful about, like, if you are looking to get time with someone, to get them to weigh in on something, like how to set the agenda for that meeting, how to invite that person to a meeting, all that stuff. The nuts and bolts, I think, is extremely
It is
extremely
important because you don't want to waste anyone's time. You don't want to waste your time, first and foremost. And if you get smart about your time, I think you're more aware of other people's time as well. But it first comes from not wasting your own time.
Yeah. Agreed.
Would you recommend people going down that path of, corporate America, just, don't see the sunlight and like get to the finish line as fast as possible, like get to the retirement line as fast as possible? Would you recommend that to people?
No. I wouldn't. I think ideally you want to do something that you're at least interested in, and of course is well paid for because it's well demanded or well in demand. If you have those two, you can kind of not go wrong. I was fortunate enough to do something that I found at least interesting. I wouldn't say it was a passion of mine, but I was at least interested in it. And then, kind of like serving your time, so to speak, committing to a company, getting more and more senior. I think that was something that I do recommend, as opposed to like career hopping or jumping or switching careers every 3-5 years. But to answer your question, I think to just place everything on money without considering the quality of life is, I think, not a full complete picture that I would give, and certainly not the advice I would give to someone starting out.
Sure. So it's like the balance has to be like somewhat on some level as you go in life.
Yeah.
Can't be too askew.
And a balance is, if it isn't struck early on, it's going to rear its head, in terms of engagement, motivation. It's going to be very, very difficult for someone, working a high-paid but awful, miserable job to wake up in the morning and have to do that thing, day in and day out. A brief story: I considered investment banking right out of college, and then kind of a little bit during my MBA, and pretty much everyone I talked to said that it was a miserable existence. Like, you're putting in a ton of hours, you're doing something that you're likely not passionate about. I mean, who's passionate about private placements or issuing bonds or something like that?
Would you like to be a drug addict or an alcoholic? Great. Here's a career opportunity for you.
So that was, for me, a really good example of what not to do. Like, if you see that something is very high paid, but the more you learn about it and the more people you talk about it, they don't really find much passion around it, I avoided that.
Yeah, smart. Yeah, I do have a few friends who are in the investment banking area, and I think the faster they get rid of, I think it's this really weird game that gets you. It's not for the sake of freedom. Once you start making money, it's more for the sake of money. It turns into it, because when you're dealing with 7-8 figures, then it turns into a game. Like, it's so easy for it to turn into a game if you don't have a steady family, or if you don't have something that you care about more than money. And there's so much you can buy in America. There's so many different avenues that the money can take you. You can go down the art route. You can go down like the debauchery route. You can go down a very like there's so many beautiful routes that you can go towards with your money that makes it really difficult to stop playing the game, you know, or like kind of lose perspective of the balance aspect of playing the game.
Great.
Yeah. How was it? When did you decide it was like, okay, like I'm kind of done and I want to do like travel and see the world and maybe take a break?
It was actually before the pandemic.
Oh, was that?
I had a number in mind
Mm-hmm.
as early as my 20s.
Okay.
Of what money would I need to sustain a comfortable quality of life. And I hit that number before the pandemic as an executive. So I tracked my net worth, and then when I got that around bonus season, I was already thinking about what to do next, and then having conversations with my family about what that could look like. The pandemic actually like deferred things. Once that happened, it was very clear, like the life of retiring early and traveling and seeing the world was going to be put on hold. So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't the worst thing. I focused on my family, focused on the job, and but still had that dream in mind. It just happened to be deferred for 2 more years, and then once things started to reopen, that's when it was clear. Like, I remember at the time, Thailand was going through the sandbox thing, and then the ASQs, where you have to, quarantine and get tested. But as early as January 22 is when I started to kind of travel and check out whether Chiang Mai might be a good place to, plant some roots. And then lo and behold, that's where we ended up choosing.
Nice. Yeah. And 2 years going strong.
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
But it's so easy. I mean, I have 7-8 months past here, like, for me, like I arrived like in the end of November.
Yeah.
And time just flies over here.
Yeah.
It's a very nice existence compared to a lot of other places in the world. Just the general feel of it, Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. When you're talking about you had a number in mind and you were working towards it, I got curious about what kind of comfort you were used to. Like, tell me a little bit about your upbringing. Like, was it like, did you struggle, or like was it more like?
So what do you mean by comfort or struggle?
I mean, like, were your parents sort of like enabling you to try different things, and you had the flexibility and freedom to try out different things and like live out different paths, or was it sort of like restricted and like you didn't have much options?
So there's a couple of things, if you're asking about my childhood, that helps inform maybe why I decided to pursue another path of the sort of second half of my life. The first thing is around the purpose of life, right? Okay. Like the meaning of life. I was raised in a household with 2 immigrant parents from Vietnam, wartime Vietnam, who came to the U.S. in the late 70s, and they really struggled. Not just struggled with the war or leaving what they called home, but also struggling with like just making a living and surviving in the U.S. They worked multiple jobs. They saved as much as they could. And when I was growing up, I was seeing already the fruits of their labor, of what they were able to get from all that hard work. And so one thing I think stuck with me, which is like, my dad always had a saying about, do you eat to work or do you work to eat? And he always subscribed to this thing about like working. You know, it's about strong work ethic, and the purpose of life is to have meaningful work and just to work really hard and provide for your family. While I think I agree with that money is very important and supporting your family is very important and should come first, that I didn't really believe that is the end all of one's life. That is defined by one's career or one's ability to support their family. I think I hit that goal pretty early, right, in my late 30s. So I was searching, I think, for deeper meaning in life beyond that of my job and my family. Like, who am I outside of the roles that I play as an executive or as a father? So I think that was the second sort of thing about my childhood that helps inform why I decided to take some time off. It's this seeing, like, why spend the majority of your life working and providing for others? Is there more, you know, to that I could find if I took some time off? Another thing I think is pretty specific to my story is especially on my dad's side, I come from a family with a lot of health issues, particularly around the heart, so like heart disease, strokes, heart attacks, etc. I think on my dad's side, 6 or 7 out of the 8 boys that my grandma had, my dad being one of them, has had some form of heart disease.
Boys? Did she have only boys?
Yeah, only boys.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So knowing that and seeing my dad, seeing my uncles work all their life only to like suffer through very sudden, very abrupt heart disease, it was a wake-up call for me about, like, hey, do I really want to go down the same path of, you know, working an 8 to 6 and then, you know, have my eventual heart attack? Are there ways to live a healthier life to help prolong my life? What role does stress have in contributing to heart disease? So a lot of those questions I think I began to ask, even in the midst of a very, very busy corporate career. I could just picture myself walking down that path, and if I didn't address it, then, you know, it would really be for naught.
Impending cardiac arrest.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to be one of those, like a few of my uncles did. You know, just collapse after a sudden, cardiac arrest.
Yeah, that's crazy because my dad's side also has a history with heart stuff too. My grandpa had like a stent operation. Like, that's kind of the reason why we came back to Turkey, actually, to like care for him, walk him through the whole process. We got him like a really, really good doctor in Turkey, and he lived like 20 years after that, like quite nice.
After the stent.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. It was great.
That's great. That's a blessing, for sure.
And I'm also on that sort of. Thankfully, my dad pushed me to really question myself also, and in like deeper ways of like religion, because I was raised religious, you know. I was gonna ask you that too. Were you raised religious?
Not particularly. My mom is Christian. My dad is Buddhist. I went to church growing up with my mom's side of the family. I was familiar with both religions, but I wouldn't call myself like religious or spiritual as a child.
Yeah. I was a little bit more devout.
Yeah.
But that pushed me to question a lot of things, like really on a really deep level. So now I'm on the same path of like, okay, like how do I play for longevity?
Yeah.
and what are my habits that I need to curb, what are my habits I need to like you pay more attention to, how do I engage my heart more, you know, like whether it's through cycling, whether it's through endurance, like climbing, joints is a huge thing, like tall lanky guys, you know, like and if you're like me, if you like to do sports and you push your limits to 100%, then joints become really freaking important.
Big issue. Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, it's. I think I see more of the world smartening up to this, and kudos.
Agreed.
Yeah. Are you going to be talking about this as well on your podcast?
I didn't have plans for that, but yeah, that sounds like a really good blog topic for me to write about, and then an episode about health and wellness and how a mini retirement or early retirement could really help provide some perspective, if not an intervention around the habits that you're talking about.
Yeah, because we're gonna live in this, you know, for this life. That there's no, you know, like freeze my head, like pop it in another body, unless Walt Disney figured it out. But we need to really treat this as like the temple, and you know, like this long place that we're here for a bit.
Yes.
Tell me more about your idea, and why did you even think about like starting a blog or a podcast and sharing these ideas?
I have always liked writing.
Creative or more like informative?
Both.
Both, right? Oh, nice.
I was an English literature major.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Me too.
I have a very, very strong appreciation for the beauty in language. And it's like it's always been sort of a hobby of mine. And I dabbled in writing both fictional and nonfiction pieces throughout, you know, the past 20 years. And when, you know, I went on my early retirement, I suddenly had a lot of time on my hands and asked myself, hey, if money is not an issue, which it isn't, then what do I choose to do? And writing was one of them. So what would I write about? And I wanted to write about my journey. I wanted to write about the stories, my decision to retire early, the life that I'm building here in Thailand, and the happiness and fulfillment that I'm finding. And that kind of led one thing to the next, and I suddenly had this like collection of entries that I decided to post on a blog. And next up is like just trying to find another channel by which to connect with an audience. I found one podcast in particular very helpful in my decision to move here to Thailand, and so decided to, I think that inspired me to kind of reach a similar audience, knowing that there's a paucity or a scarcity of similar podcasts for people who might be in the US or Australia or Europe, like contemplating making a big move like that, especially if they're going to move their family.
A lot of moving parts, right?
And I thought that a podcast or a blog on that very topic would be a helpful resource for someone like that.
For sure. Do you mind sharing the podcast that helped you decide?
Yeah, it's Will Roadhouse is the podcaster, and something about like life in Thailand. He has since sunsetted that podcast series, but I believe it's still live on both podcast and Spotify, because I think he's archived those episodes and you can still download them. Smart. But I found them to be very helpful. He's a big he lives in Bangkok, and he's a big proponent of Thailand, of expat life in Thailand, and Bangkok in particular as a destination for expats.
Oh, nice. But did he mention Chiang Mai at all? Is that how
he did? And I actually reached out to him to get his thoughts about Chiang Mai in particular, and he thinks, and I kind of agree with him, that it is very small here relative to Bangkok, and I think he said that it was just not large enough for the varied interests and diverse interests that he or many of his clients. He was in real estate. Many of his clients had in retirement.
Yeah, I think for me it's a perfect size city, or maybe I'm just in the aftershock of living in a mega city for 15 years of my life.
Yeah. I mean, he's got a good point. Like, let's talk about the malls, right? Like the Central Festival that we have here, the largest mall in Chiang Mai, pales in comparison to any one mall that Bangkok has. I mean, even the regional ones like Central La Prau or Central Rama, it's like it's like smallish in comparison. So I think that for people looking for just like myself, with a lot of time in your hands and with very different interests, I can see that.
Yeah.
That Bangkok does offer a lot more.
Of course, yeah. There's so many things you can do in the city stretches, and I mean, it's Chiang Mai. I think is only recently turned into like a tourist destination. Maybe in the past 25-30 years or something like that, from what I can gather. The moat is like still new, like the things around the moat, how they've made it like nice with the trees and stuff. So I think like 25 years ago you would have just this one-off like random tourist from England where they were like talking to the agency, and they're like, oh yeah, you should check out Chiang Mai, and they're like, why? Like, isn't it dangerous there? And they're like, no, like it's cool. And like the first few people who arrive here are like, wow, this is awesome. Yeah
I agree. It's if you're into nature like I am, if you enjoy hiking, Bangkok's not the best place to be.
No.
It would take some time to get out of the city with a car or riding on a bus, and then even then it's like it pales into comparison. The nature that is around Bangkok pales into comparison as to something that's readily accessible for us here, right?
Of course.
So I would say for the majority of expats, especially those who are retired, Bangkok makes sense because there's a lot more resources. But for those who are looking for the quiet life, peace and nature, Bangkok is probably one of the worst places to be in.
I mean, I was going to ask you this too, but just piggybacking off of what you said about the nature in Bangkok, you would have to go to Chatuchak Market. Around that area is like a nice park. But that's probably the only nature bit that is around, really.
Like a park. And it's, I mean, they're nice parks, right? But they're still artificial. They're still manicured. It's not something that we could easily, like you and I could just hop in a car or a motorbike, drive 10, 15 minutes, and we'll see very like unspoiled nature around us. And it's I don't think you can really get that.
No, not in Bangkok. How about parks? I don't see a lot of parks in Thailand like other countries do, or like in the States or in Turkey. There's like a lack of parks. Is it like a Western thing to have parks? Like
I don't know. I never really thought about that in terms of like, national parks per. I don't know.
Or I'm just talking about like two swings and a slide kind of thing, just so like grannies can take their grandchildren out.
Yeah, because like those master plan communities, at least where I'm from in Texas, is very, very common, right? Because before you even build out the city, you're thinking about what allocation you'll need for nature, green, a lake. So I imagine a lot of it is a function of just planning, city planning.
Okay.
And that, I mean, Chiang Mai is old. It's like super, super old. Yeah. So to have parts of the old town, old city, plus around those parts, to have dedicated parks, I mean, that is a blessing, because I imagine parks was not a priority when they were thinking of building out this city. Yeah,
that's why it's on the corners. Like a little park here, a little park there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Smart. Do you find that, like, in your retired life, you design your days as if you were still like working, but with like different activities? Like, do you still treat it as like this, like back to back?
I would say the only thing that resembles it is the use of Google Calendar, but
Okay.
Google Calendar for me is just to remind myself of any important appointments that I have. But yeah, I mean, it's like night and day. If you
Right.
compare my calendar, so to speak, from the U.S. to now, it's completely different.
Yeah.
You'll see large blocks of time that I have free now, and yeah, it's a joy and a blessing to have that.
Yeah, because you're free to just choose how to spend that time, and it's admirable that you actually want to spend your time like writing and informing other people and just like being that guide that you didn't have or maybe had like a lack of, you know.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you, so is this your first podcast?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
First to be,
Nice.
join a podcast.
Yeah, yeah, nice. Awesome. I always want to talk more about it. I always want to like say it's so much space for like good information, you know.
Yeah.
There's so much room for it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope more people do it. I'm excited to check out yours, really.
Yeah.
Especially like one thing I would, even though I don't have a kid, I would love to hear how, you know, raising your child would feel compared to like rearing your child in America these days, you know, in Chiang Mai or other parts of Southeast Asia. Do you think it's like a big difference, or do you think you can like create a bubble around your child? So it's like
there is a lot under our control as parents to provide safety and comfort for our children, even halfway around the world. And I'm very lucky and blessed to have that. For example, having them go to international school, I think provides some sort of safety, comfort, right? Because everything's taught in English. A lot of their friends and classmates are from English-speaking countries, so it does provide some sort of like less culture shock, I think, to them. But then if you compare that to like things that are very, very different from the U.S., let's take motorbikes, right? Here, and scooters, like the ubiquity of it all.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's very scarce, especially in Texas, to see anyone ride a motorbike or a scooter.
It's like a one-off Harley Davidson or something.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things that come up as a parent, right? I mean, you're thinking about vehicle accidents and how common they are here in Thailand, and the driving age for a car, unfortunately, here in Thailand is 18, so unlike that of the U.S. And you know, I've got a child in high school who is of driving age, or would be of driving age back in the U.S., but has to wait until he's 18 here. And we really thought about, you know, whether he should get licensed for motorbikes, but that's a very big difference. Like, we wouldn't have needed to think about that in the U.S. and worried about, like, is he going to get into an accident? Like, should we put him in at risk there or here versus there? It's just the issues are a little different here, right?
But I think, okay, I want to hear your thoughts about traffic here as well. I sense that traffic in Thailand is very intuitive, and there's a lot of people looking out for each other. Like, the traffic is designed, or not designed, the mentality of people in traffic is like they're looking at you as well. It's like it's not you just need to look out for yourself. You have to look out for other people because other people are looking out for you. And that gives me a lot of comfort. It flows very different than traffic in Istanbul, for instance. How do you think?
It is just, relatively speaking, to the U.S., it is chaotic here. Meaning, like, recognition of lanes or signaling that you're switching lanes or making a turn is just far less common here. in Thailand than in the U.S. The enforceability of that, like of speeding in, like, say, a school zone, you just don't do that in the U.S. because you'll get a ticket. Like, you're bound to get a ticket. But over here, I mean, you're not gonna, like, the most common like enforcement of traffic is what I see on the roads, at least, is really just giving, you know, folks tickets for not wearing a helmet.
Right.
But outside of that, like, there's very, very few enforcement, which is why, you know, so many people just drive in the middle of two lanes, or like don't signal when they turn, and that all causes accidents, right? I've been on both ends of seeing the accidents, but then also being on a motorbike and almost getting into accidents. And yeah, I can see that. It is very chaotic, relatively speaking.
I guess it's super relative, because once you have that high sort of everyone's like obeying the rules of traffic, then you minimize the risk of anything anything going south.
People suddenly start following the rules when they think that people are watching, right?
Yeah.
When Big Brother's watching, either through cameras or through a police car driving by. Yeah.
Fascinating comparison. I don't know though. I feel like even with the accidents, it just like one way another American guest described Chiang Mai or Thailand in general is that a lot of autonomy is given to people. So you know, you're responsible for your visa, you're responsible for your stay, your taxes, your everything, your traffic. You know, there's all responsibility on you. You get to figure it out. There's not a lot of rules, you know. There are some rules that you need to abide by, but the rest is like autonomous and intuitive, and it's not for everybody, for sure. But I think everybody, if they're super used to a Western context, I think everybody should at least experience this way of living for a short time in their life. You know, I think it might be a good way to, you know, widen their or like expand their horizons a bit.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think for my kids, they definitely have had that type of exposure of a country that is, like you said, you know, more freedom, right, and more independence and autonomy, and the pros and cons of that.
Yeah, freedom. I don't know, it's so crazy because America for me as a kid was this sort of neverland, you know. Do you know Patrick Bet-David?
No.
He's podcast guy, sales guy turned into entertainment, but he's a family person, and like he sends his kids off to, you know, all sorts of sports and training, and he has like all these like famous people on the internet / you know media on his podcasts. It's quite cool. And he was reacting to this video of, maybe you've seen this, it's like a video of like they're asking kids in America what they want, and kids mostly say like money, or like, you know, like $1,000 million or like a car or whatever, and they're asking kids in the Middle East or like less privileged places, and they're like, I want to see my dad, like I want some bread, you know, like I want to see my mom. And like what his reaction to that was, okay, I was both kids. Like it's crazy when you're in these third world countries, so to say, that you can't even imagine desiring money or desiring a car or desiring a life like beyond that, you know. You're limited to just survival. And it's that's why a lot of people went to America. I think it was this sort of neverland, you know, this place where you can actually imagine more stuff, you know, because back home there's nothing. I don't know, but these days I think that neverland is kind of turned into a dystopia almost. I don't know what's happening.
In what way do you mean dystopia?
I think it's less about, you know, like imagining a future or freedom or something, or like making it. It's more about keeping this thing going, whatever that is, and you buy into the system of freedom, or a visa, or America, green card, whatever, but then you're kind of roped into it, and like you can't forfeit. Like you're in it, like now you're in the wheel, like now you have to like keep running, because it's this concept that we've created. It's this constitution, and it needs people to sort of continue its existence, right? So I don't know. And I was a kid in America, so I didn't feel much of that. But now thinking in hindsight, I think the landscape is shifting like quite fast in that way. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I did feel, being in the U.S., that there was a system or a machine, and I was a part of it, and it was driven by money. It was driven by greed. It was driven by capitalism, and there didn't seem to be an end to it. Like you can always have more.
Yeah.
So I can see what you're saying about, it's a breeding ground for some sort of dystopia, away from traditional values of family or of being a good person versus being a wealthy person, right? But I can say that the ultimate freedom of choosing to be in that machine or choosing to be out of it, I'm very fortunate to have that. And would it have happened any other way if I grew up in Vietnam, outside of the war, or in Australia, had my parents moved there, like half of my dad's family did go to Australia? I don't know. Who knows? But I can say that I am very thankful and very blessed with the decision of not wanting to be in that system anymore, and then choosing to be out of it, and now living what I think, is a life that's more free of that, or free from the pressures of that, the expectations of that. Now here in Thailand. Yeah.
Nice. And is there a certain framework or certain sort of mental state that allowed you to even perceive that you could have freedom from it,
Yeah, that's a good question. I think life-changing experience I'm very fortunate to have was sophomore year of college. That's when 9/11 happened. I was fairly disenchanted from that event, and then I decided to take some time off. I was getting some pressure from my parents of like, hey, you can't just take some time off from college and like just hang out and around the house, right? You got to do something. So I decided to just look up places to volunteer, and I decided that, hey, teaching English in Thailand sounds like very, very cool, very fun, very enriching. At the very least, I can see a different part of the world and then help others that are, just less fortunate. And I did, and I taught English for about 4 to 5 months before going back to university. And during that time period, I think what I really got was a sense that there was a way of life outside of the American life that I was used to. Because up until then, I didn't spend any time really outside of the U.S., let alone living like a local would in a different country. And I thought that was very liberating to at least see and experience, hey, like working for a paycheck, working to get, I don't know, a brand new Tesla. There's more to life than that. And I think teaching English in Thailand back in 2001 was a wake-up call for me that there was more to life than that.
That was like the seed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And then that helped inform my plan, right? Of eventually, hey, if and when I ever get to that number and get to retire early, I'd like to redesign my life to be more in accordance with the happiness and peace and fulfillment that I saw in that brief amount of time teaching English in Thailand than 20 plus years working in the US. That's always stuck with me about that vision that I had for my life.
If you had to do it again, would you do it differently, like reaching that number? Or would you take the same route you did?
No, I think I would have took the same route.
Yeah.
There were a lot of paths that I think I could have taken and still gotten the number, but I'm very, I think, fortunate to have chosen a path that got me to the number as quickly as it did, plus, like engaged me in a way that was, like I mentioned earlier, very interesting. Like I found my work very interesting, and I got to meet some very amazing people, many of whom I still call my friends, and so, yeah, I would do it all over again.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what I hear from a lot of people, like do the MBA for the people, for the connections, for the folk that will support your endeavors in the future, and you can find people that are, like pushing the boundaries of their limits and trying to make a dent in the universe in like a positive way. So you have access to these people. That's what my friend was saying, because I was entertaining the idea of doing a master's degree in business as well, and they were like, do you have like good money to like buy a good circle, or you have like not so much money to do like the theory, which you can find anywhere else? Like it's less about the theory, more about the connections.
Right. Agreed.
And just in corporate life as well, it's about your connections.
Yeah.
It's less about how you can do things. It's like, do you know the person who will do it best? Is always the default that I've heard. Yeah. People, man. It's all about the people. Yeah. And within the let's get specific with this number. I'm not gonna ask you what it is. I'm just gonna maybe look for some advice, for some people who are just starting off. Should they have a number? What should it be? What are some nice avenues that you see, after having done corporate America? Maybe like you've also keeping your, ear close to the streets. Maybe you have some different ways people commonly, like work out their number. Is there anything?
Yeah. So there's a lot here on this topic. I would say the most important things are actually two numbers, and I'll explain why. And these are the two numbers that you need to get to that number.
Sure.
So the dollar amount to sustain to provide you financial independence and sustain a retired early lifestyle in perpetuity rests on basically a fraction, a numerator and a denominator. The numerator is basically your cost of living.
Your burn rate.
That cost of living is a very important number. If you don't know that number, it's very important for you to know that number, because it's like a promise that you make for yourself. A lot of people don't ever hit that number because they allow their cost of living to get out of control, right? Like the more they're paid, the more they spend, and the more they spend, the more time that they'll need to work to basically hit that number. So that end goal of ever hitting that number keeps being deferred because of the bigger house or the bigger car or more cars or whatever it is, right?
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah, I was very vigilant about capping that cost of living number. And as you know, I'm a big proponent of minimalism. I find that like at a certain point, it actually hurts us to have more. So
can you say that again?
At a certain point, it hurts us to have more.
You heard.
So having that number and sticking to that, while difficult, having the faith that you can still have plenty of happiness by capping that cost of living is super important. And I don't think we would have hit that number had it not been for that vigilance. The second number is basically some view of how your money will grow. It's a rate of return.
Right.
I used a 4% rule, which is, I thought, a very conservative number. 'Cause to get 4% return on money invested, I mean, really any dummy can get that.
Yes.
But I thought it was at the very lowest risk, I can make that, right, in the long term. And I just want to be very conservative about the number that I need to make. So the less that number is, the higher, because it's a denominator, the higher the number you'll need to retire early, right? And so that was conservative in my opinion.
And you're predisposed to hard stuff, so you don't want to go into crypto.
No, not at all. So for me, striking that balance between risk and reward was very important. And I erred on the side of like, hey, I worked really, really hard for this money, and I do not want to lose it by putting it all on,
of course,
crypto or whatever it is.
Gamble it, basically.
Yeah, so it's a diversified portfolio, but that I think is a very important number to understand. Of like your expected rate of return, how are you going to get that 4% or 5% or 6%? And then one little caveat that I would insert is that inflation is important. So in doing the calculation of 4%, it's good to, when you model it out, as anyone really should, you should have some sort of inflation factor. So that 4% should grow over time, so that, and especially, in recent times with COVID and a dollar isn't what it used to be.
Nope.
So it's very important to just adjust that every now and then. For me, it's like about 5 years. Every 5 years, I will adjust the number just to make sure we're on track, but we're good.
Yeah. Nice. This is extremely important. Everything that you mentioned, even if you're not working towards a number, I think these are sort of solid city rules, for life. If you're existing in a city, if you're not, monking it out in the mountains and your burn rate 0 and you really don't care about any of this, fine, you don't need to be listening to this. But, if you're listening to this, chances are you need to hear this. And it's important stuff. I think one thing I would add to that is to surround yourself with people who also share the same goal and would be understanding of, these caps. Like, they would understand the long-term benefits of minimalism. There's quite a bit of confusion, with young people these days about, what's valuable and what's not. And to find someone who values the same things you do is, like, to surround yourself with people like this is, I think, also very important. Because you could be having all these, like, amazing rules for yourself and, like, following them, but then if there's, like, a lot of influence just pulling you this way and that way and this way, it's hard to keep track.
Agreed. Agreed.
And do you socialize in Chiang Mai in different groups?
Yes, probably early on for sure. And that has kind of shifted now that I'm spending a lot more time in Bangkok. But when I was, socializing and making friends, I found a few groups to be super, super helpful in Chiang Mai. And I think that's just a really good approach to it all, of like making friends through shared activities, because it has both the double benefit of, yes, you're making friends, but also you're doing things that you find interesting or find that you're passionate about. So an example of that would be, like, for example, writing. Like, I was interested in writing, and there's a writing group here.
There's a writing group. Nice.
There's a writing group here in Chiang Mai. Or yoga. If you're interested in yoga, there's plenty of yoga studios, right? And then you can make friends that way. Hiking, that's one of the largest groups I've seen, if not the largest group that I've seen on Facebook groups, is the hiking group. And I've made a lot of friends that way, of just because, what else do you do when you're hiking a very long trail for a couple of hours? You talk and you converse and you get to really know people. So it's been, a blessing to meet so many different people from all different facets and walks of life, and many of whom I call my friends here.
Nice.
In Chiang Mai.
Yeah, in 2 years. I think since there's like a filter of how I see it when you go to, primary school, kindergarten, there's no filter. It's just like the same zone, there's nothing necessarily like binding you together in terms of like a life choice or like your memory level or like your interests or whatever. But as you like progress in school, the filter kind of gets like, okay, you're in literature major because you're interested in that. You like to read, you like history, you like psychology, you like sociology. So it like the people that you'll meet in college that's what they say, oh, wait for college, when you're in high school. It's like, yeah, it's going to get better. Like, yeah, because the shared commonalities between people, I think, is more. And I think over here, there's quite a bit of people who value a lot of things that we just talked about. And it's easy to connect with people because they're so open. Yeah. Is it the same in Bangkok, do you think? The way?
Yes. I mean, I think it's a lot easier in Bangkok. I know
okay.
some people would disagree with me there, but I think in terms of, like, just use meetups as an example. Meetups is just not a platform that Chiang Mai uses, but in Bangkok, it's super, super popular.
Sure.
I was a big meetup fan in Dallas when I was living there. And so found it to be extremely helpful here in Bangkok for meeting a host of different people, not just tourists or people passing through, but expats and locals alike. Like it's such a easy way, I think, and very convenient way to just show up and then do something that is a shared activity and then get to meet friends that way.
Yeah. It's always nice to have like different ways to connect with people, and I totally agree. When you're hiking together, it's a better bonding experience rather than drinking or just like having some coffee.
Yeah, agreed. And I know I don't work here in Chiang Mai or in Bangkok, but I do know that that's usually a source where people can make friends, right? You make friends out of your colleagues. But without that, I felt like, I did need to make a conscious effort to meet people and make friends. So I found it super, super helpful to have Meetup or Facebook groups as the means to do that.
Yeah. For anyone who's looking to make some friends, the groups are where it's at.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, this has been a thrill for me.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course.
It's been, also a thrill for me to share my story, share my experience, and hopefully your listeners can get some valuable advice from it.
Oh, I know for sure, because just a week ago, someone posted a long comment, actually, the first long comment about, I was also thinking about doing a different move, and America's not what it used to be, and this is making me think about different possibilities and stuff. So I really appreciate you posting these stories with people who are, from the States, or because I love to document the culture here. So there's quite a few Thai people that I tried to interview deliberately, because I'm genuinely interested in how they live out their lives, because it creates this aura, this energy that we're so sucked into it, but also I want to have a spotlight on people who chose this place, because I think they're as equally important. They make the vibe, because people choosing and coming here and sort of respecting the culture and helping them sustain and maybe leaving it a little better than they found it, I find it very, very important to talk to people from outside as well. So thank you for joining.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Anytime.
Yeah. Is there any parting ideas or thoughts you would like to add?
Yeah, I would just say that if you're interested in learning more about mini retirements, early retirements, investing, also life in Thailand, work around, we didn't spend too much time on this episode talking about it, but self-discovery,
that's a
what
whole
you can
episode in
do to
itself.
like improve yourself, or that whole scope of like, hey, what if you didn't have to work? What would you spend your time doing?
Right.
Check out my blog. It's lestert.blog, so super easy to remember. And the podcast is forthcoming and should also deal with these topics or cover these topics in more detail.
We're so excited for it. Thank you so much again, Lester. It was a wonderful Wednesday morning for me.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everybody. This was another episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.